April 29th, 2000. This is the Mountain School 6th, 7th grade oral history project. We are Mark Leonard and Kirby Veach. Interviewing Carl Steiner and Eloise Steiner. At their house in Townsend.
Where did you go to school?
Townsend Elementary School.
Did it change at all? Has it changed since you went to school?
Yes, they built a big addition on. Plus, everything is speeded up.
Yeah. Much newer and everything.
What was one of your favorite moments when you were at Townsend School? Like your favorite class?
I hate to tell you, but I had no favorite class. School and myself did not agree. I had a problem reading. My father had a problem reading. My son has a problem reading. And when we got to arithmetic, once we got into the reading, Max sort of dropped off because we did not have the type of teaching we have today. We didn't have one-on-one or extra help.
So what was school like?
What was it like? In what part?
Like during the whole school day?
What was your school like? What did you do?
Well, we had 3 rooms that was utilized with different grades. And one room was the library. And I went to school just about the time the wood stove left. And we had the old desk, and we switched over to the newer desk with a pipe underneath of the one-piece desk. And it's hard to think. If I loved it, I might be able to tell it quicker. But I wasn't a school person.
How did you get to school?
Well, we lived up on the hill, and the school system hired a car. Her name was Eva Chamberlain, and she had a 38 V8 2-door killer doors, and she'd come up and pick 3 Burton boys up that lived at Holt's and myself all year long. And the cute part about that was the older cars had taller wheels and the roads had ruts. And she'd get in the rut, she'd stay there. She says, there's a bottom to the rut. There's no bottom to the shoulder. And that was the cute part that I can remember.
What was your favorite subject, even though you didn't really have one? Is there anything that you did kind of look forward to? Or anything?
Time to leave. No, I used to like arithmetic, because you don't know what arithmetic is now. It's modern math. Of course, Eloise might want to tell where she went to school, too.
Yeah. How about you?
I went to school in Jamaica. There was a 2-room schoolhouse. The Jamaica Library is there now. And my mother went to school there. Because I was born in Jamaica. Down on what is called the Depot Road. But it's just across the cement bridge as you're going to the salmon hole, which is down at the state park. And I started school there, but then I went to one winter, 1940, I went to school in Bells Falls. And then I come back to Jamaica, and then later I went to Windsor, Mass, and I went to Williamstown, Mass, and then I come back to Jamaica. And I only went to 8th grade. I didn't go to high school. And those were my school days.
So, for both of you, this is, what was the biggest social event in your area?
What time of life?
Like when you were a child?
Oh,
Well, we made up what we did. I mean, we didn't have programs to do, so what do you mean, honey?
Like a fair or something? Like town fairs or anything?
Oh, Townsend had a town fair when Carl was growing up.
yeah, we had a Townsend fair. There was right now where you go into the high school between the Dutton Gymnasium, which is the Industrial Art Building, and the school. Used to be the IGA store and a road by it that went down over the hill to the ball field, and that used to be the big fair. The only problem with the big fair was that there was so many booths to be ran that all people in town had to run the booth. They never got to see the fair. So what happened is that's the way the fair went out, because people got sick of not, and then of course the rides and stuff would take most of the money. So the biggest event at that fair was this greased pig, because the greased pig was a little guy, and he'd always run across that steep bank, which is all sewers at that time. They'd just run out on the bank, and it was a mess, and this pig would go over through there and all these guys after it. And the other big event is they had 2 snow fences, and they had one of these big sea balls, and they'd have the different fire companies come, and they'd be with these live hoses pushing that ball. I don't think they do it anymore. Maybe they do in some places. And they'd force these back and forth to see who could get the ball to the other end. With like 10 men on the hose was all the pressure they had. At that time, they didn't have the pressure we got now, but just the same, it was, it was quite a event.
So what kind of special events happened in your town, like nowadays? Like,
We don't have them.
Well, yeah, you get the...
Oh, we have Hospital Day.
Hospital Day, Pumpkin Festival. They have big flea markets on the common. Those are mostly geared around tourism, but it's also an event, so you call it either. And we did go to the Pumpkin Festival last year, and we did our first taking bison stew, 20 quarts of it, and 2 quart jars of jerky that we'd made. And before 3 o'clock, we'd sold out of bison stew, and I only had 1 bottle of jerky left. And people loved it, so that was a big event for us.
But for entertainment, we didn't have movies, and they had dances, like at the town hall in Jamaica, and they had dances down on at the pavilion in Townsend. And in our time, that was our entertainment, was to go to those dances. And so when we was young like you, we used to go with our folks to the dances. And down at the farm, there was the barn, and Carl used to go to dances with his folks down there. So that was our entertainment.
This pavilion hall she was talking about was on the fairground. It was an open air pavilion hall, which they had different things, and one of them was you could use it for dancing. You gotta look to it.
so, where'd you meet?
At a fair. Newfane Fair.
I believe that still goes on, right?
Pardon?
No,
Still doesn't go on?
no, they don't have anything here. No, they haven't had it for a couple of years now. But that's where we met.
It was the Newbrook Fire Department.
But I think if Carl was to tell you the truth, he used to see me at the dances, but he wouldn't speak to me. And then when I got to go to the fair with my aunt and uncle, then he decided he would like to say hello to me, and that's where we met at the fair.
What souvenirs did you bring home after the fair, or
Nothing,
if any?
nothing,
Did you bring anything?
no.
No, the thing that I remember mostly about the Townsend Fair, Dad was an electrician. And the guys that had the rides I say guys because back then it was all guys, now it's women and guys, you know. And they would be running the rides, and if they got in trouble, the electrician dad was there, so they'd slip him a bunch of tickets and say, let your son go for a ride. So there was this thing called a bullet. And I rode on that thing. I loved it. And never got sick. And they'd go this way and that way. You ever ride on one?
I don't know what it is. What is it?
It's a great tall unit with a big arm like this that swings around. With the thing looks like a bullet, and they turn as it comes down around and turns like this. So you're going forward, backwards, upside down. And
I've been on one like that, but not ones that go upside down or anything.
some people, they have stomach relieving.
Did the Great Depression affect your family at all?
Yes. This was in the 30s. Of course, I don't remember it. But my father is from Nuremberg, Germany. And my uncle was over here. He lived in Townsend, but he came from New York City. And he had, everything he had was in stocks. He lost them all.
Oh.
But he was a man that was a smart man. He gained them all back. And because he knew how to play. And when Hitlerism was getting to its peak, he sent money over from my grandmother and my father and his brother to come over. And they landed in Nova Scotia. And then they came to Townsend. And they lived at Harry Wolf's place. It's on the Deer Valley Road. And they lived there for a while, and this was when influenza was big, and that was between 1913 and 17, I believe. I don't know exactly. And the big boys it got, and the little boys it didn't get. Mm-hmm. And Dad was a little boy, so it didn't get him, but his brother, it did. And but they had a tough time. And if you want to know a couple things, I'll tell you a couple little incidents. How it's almost like segregation or peer pressure, whatever you want to call it. Somebody told them to take your guns and take them to the town clerk and turn them in because they were German and Hitlerism. So he went down there and the town clerk says, "What are you doing?" "Well, we've been told to take your guns down." He says, "You need your guns to get me and stuff. Take them back." Mm-hmm. So he had one smart guy in town, you know.
That was here, Tom.
But that's what went on in that period of time. And then they had to go back to New York because they couldn't make it. And then Dad worked as a busboy, and then he worked in Mack truck. And then in the 20s, he met my mother. And there's another funny thing. She was expecting a call, and it wasn't the right call. So when she heard Dad, she says, "Come back in 6 months." He waited 6 months and he went back. They got married and came up here and stayed up here all the time afterwards. And these are funny little things that happen. You'll have them happen in your lifetime, so you haven't had them in ours. And they lived right up in the village here. But this was time when Dad come to town. It was a time when a battery, you go to the store and buy a battery for your car. Back then they didn't. They take the cells apart. You got different cells, like a 6-volt will have 3 cells, a 12-volt will have 6 cells. And they'd take a hacksaw and cut between the cells of the flat bar, they'd cut it. Then they'd melt the lead out, pull them apart. The good cells they'd put in the battery, and the old cells they'd take out. So they'd rejuvenate your old battery with new cells. Almost like they're going to do with your body years down the road. They're working on it right now. Really. And that's part of it. And then he wired a lot of houses in town, what they call knob and tube. Knob and tube is a covered wire. Only every timber you go through, you got a porcelain sleeve. And everything was porcelain. Everything was out in the open. Porcelain light socket, 2 screws on it. Everything was right out where you can see it. And he wired many houses, and he did one, the power line from the 4 corners to the top of the hill where those beautiful stone wall goes. He put that up. He took the contract to put that up back on the old poles. So This was back when you did anything. He worked for the Blood Brothers putting a Dutton gymnasium up. And what did he say he got an hour? 32 cents an hour. Like that, back then. So that, trying to answer your question about did it hurt our family? Well, that was hardships to them back then, you know.
Did you ever meet or see President Coolidge in person?
No.
Never?
No. Really, when you look back at when we first, before we get married, when we get married, you didn't move around much. You didn't have the money. You're lucky to have a car and lucky to have money to get gas to go somewhere. I mean, you didn't go every week for groceries. You shopped in a little store in town.
Most all your things were in your cellar. You had big gardens and you watered. Your mother's canned, and you raised your own meat, your pig, and whatever, calf, whatever else beef you had. And my mother, she had like 300 and 400 jars of canned goods in her cellar every winter.
Mm.
So that's how we lived.
They even canned the meat.
And bread was around 12 cents a loaf. And it's $1, $2 now.
Well, gas, you get almost 6 gallons for $1 back then.
So you didn't go to Brattleboro only maybe once a year, you folks, because there was no transportation.
And I'll give you a little story about the same situation, only a little older, like when my father was a 9-year-old boy on the farm in Wolf's. They had a fair in Brattleboro, which was a county fair. And if a family went, somebody had to stay home on the farm. And it was Dad's turn to stay home on the farm. And he was up there alone. And of course, all the kids had oxen back then. That was part of their duty to learning and excitement and playtime and the whole works. And also, you know, I got better oxen than you got, you know, the peer pressure and all. And a guy came up walking to the house, and he wanted to know if his father was home. He says, no. He says, why? He says, I'm stuck in the mud hole down on the corner. Oh, Dad says, I'll get you out. And he got hooked up his oxen, started down the road, and the guy says, where's your chain? Oh, we don't pull our chain back. Everybody gets stuck. We leave it downside the road. So he goes down, and he said this car was a Stutz Bearcat, real fancy. He had the hat and the goggles and all from the city. And he hooks on and pulling through, and the guy thanked him. He said, oh, no, 9-year-old boy, you got to pull it back through. They pulled him back through, and he unhooked and gave him a silver dollar. Dad said that silver dollar was so big he rolled it all the way home. He'd never seen a silver dollar. But he said it went into the kitty, and he never saw it again. Now, the end of that story is this is in 19... What was it? He was 9 years old, born 1904. 4 9's what, quick?
4 times 9?
4 and 9.
Oh, 4 and 13.
Right. So 1913 this was. Now in 1980, there was a drugstore in town, and a guy was running it for somebody by the name of Ed Conklin. And Dad was one that made cartoons every day. And I can show you some of them later. And every day he'd go up and he'd put a cartoon in the store. So in this store, they let him hang his cartoons up. So one day he goes into this cartoon of a Stutz Bearcat with a guy with glasses. And Ed says, where did you get that? He says, I made it. Where did you see this? And he told when he was a kid. And it was this guy's father. What comes around goes around. It was his father. And he had gone to Vermont and got stuck on the back road, and a young boy pulled in her. That's a story, but it's part of the life of the family.
Did the Great Flood of 1927 affect you or your community at all, either of you?
Well, 1927, of course, we weren't around. In 1938, we were so small that I was down at Castools, which is down next to where Holland Bridge used to be, the covered bridge, which is the bridge you go over beyond Riverbend Market. And my father took us up to a camp up on the hill and broke in the window to get in. He knew the people, but he didn't have the key. and that's where we stayed. And Eloise might remember about that 38 flood.
I remember 38 flood. I lived on Back Street in Jamaica. It's called River Street. And my dad went down, took my brother and I and my mother, we went up to the village and we stayed at a house that used to be the meat market up in the village. And then he went back and got my aunt who lived in the house next to the bridge and carried her and their 9-month-old, my cousin who was 9 months old, across the bridge, and he just got across and the bridge went out. So they lost the bridge. And that was what happened in the 38 flood in Jamaica.
When did you get electricity? And how did it affect you, if you remember?
Well, when I was a kid, we had electricity in the village when I was a kid. And then we moved to Deer Ridge, which is Edward's place. We didn't have electricity. And Dad, of course, was an electrician, and he helped put the line up, so we got electricity 2 days before Christmas at that time. And I think I was about, I don't remember how old I was. Old enough so I used to like go fishing. But we had different things happen. Besides that, were kind of funny, but I don't know really enough time to tell them all. Where were you about electricity? You ever?
I don't remember when we had electricity come into Jamaica because at that time, when Marjorie got electricity, I must have been in Massachusetts. And my mother, she didn't have electricity. I don't know. I couldn't tell you when they had electricity.
And when electricity did come to your house, you had one little box down the cellar. You had one little light in this room, one little light in that room, one little light in the other room, and no base plugs. There might have been one base plug in the house. Totally different than what it is now. It was the bare facts of life.
Dad going to West Town and getting his hair cut.
Oh, yeah. When Dad come to town, this was about the same time as he was fixing batteries and all that. The only barber was in West Townsend, that's 5 miles up.
That's about where you live, at the, it was at the post office.
Yeah, and the guy was in there, and so he first come to town, and he's doing these batteries and trying to get established, and some fellows knew him. He said, where do I get a haircut? And he said, well, come with us. So they went to West Townsend, they go in, they sit down, and the guy gets up on the sawhorse. You sit on a sawhorse, you know what a sawhorse is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They didn't bother the chair, and he got his clippers out. He didn't know whether it was sharp or not, and he's clipping a head of hair, and he says, what do you think about that new guy that come to town down there? He'll never make it. He'll be down the road, he'll go back to the city, you know. And the next guy got up in the chair, and he said something about this new guy, you know, he hadn't met him, but he didn't think much of these people coming into town. And the next guy in was his dad. What'd you say your name was? Charlie Steiner. And the barber never said another word all the time they were there. Because he was the new electrician. So these are funny things that happen, but they're sort of cute when you think about them, you know.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to know where my dad come from?
Sure.
My dad come from Bear River, Nova Scotia. And he came down when he was 7 years old. And he used to live in Rawsonville. Well, he lived on a farm across from up where Pink Palace is, on a farm when they first came. And then his mother bought the corner, what used to be a corner store from Route 130, but now it's where they sell bicycles and all your sports stuff. But that was a grocery and a grain store. And then later, they went up and bought a farm that's behind Coleman's farm on the road that takes you out to that pond. What's that name of that
The
pond?
state put it in. Home, I don't know.
Gale Meadows?
Gale Meadows, yeah.
That's where it is. And before you get to Gale Meadows, there's a old house that's still there on your left. And that's where he lived. And they used to go to school in Rawsonville. But then he liked school so well that when he got out of 8th grade, he didn't have anything to do the next year. So he went up to Bonneville, and he lived with Betty Well, she's Betty Coleman now, but she was an Amadon. She lived with the Amadons, and Betty was just a little baby. He used to hold her at night. And he went to school there in Bonneville, and there was all Finns going to school in Bonneville at that time. There was a lot of Finns that...
You know what Finns are? Finland?
Oh, yeah.
Finnish people. They used to call them Finns.
When did you first get a TV or a radio or whatever? Anything?
Well, let me see. The radio, my father used to build crystal sets. When he came with the batteries, he'd build crystal sets, and he had different sets. And in fact, some of the boys, my sisters were born, this was before I was there, this was when he was doing the batteries and stuff. He'd have the boys babysit my sisters, and they had radios then.
I remember a radio that my folks had that was a Sears and Roebuck radio, and it was run by a battery. Silvertone.
The television, we lived on the hill. We moved up there in 1945. And people by the name of Graves lived where Fehrenbach's does now. This is on another road from where you went up. And they were the first ones in town to get a television set. And we'd go over there once a month or so and watch it. And it came perfectly clear. They just happened to be lined up with Channel 6, and it was perfectly clear. And so Dad always wanted one, so he got a 12-inch set from Ray Dean, which sold RCAs. And up on the farm, we tried antennas above the barn 50 feet. We tried here and there, and you couldn't get nothing but great big snowballs. You could see images. And so we never got good TV until we moved down here, and then in how many years ago was it? 35 years ago, the Townsend Television Club put in a small system which is still existing, which is 285 subscribers. And so that's sort of updated, but Townsend is a bad place to get television on an aerial back at that time. Very few people had it in town. You mind stepping back one step? There's a funny little thing that happened when her father was in Nova Scotia. A guy used to drive by their house with a team of horses and an old wagon with hogsheads in the back. You know, a hogshead is a big barrel. They're bigger round than the regular barrel. And they go eeling at night. And in the morning he'd come back with these barrels full of eels. And so one jumped out, so Willie got it and his mother cooked it and he ate it. But the eels would go up the river, and when it come to the dam with the wooden splash planks in it, the dam was made out of, they'd put their tails under the plank and all lift it up so that they could swim upstream. Now that sounds like a joke, but it's the truth, and I can't even believe it, even though this happens.
When did you first get a refrigerator?
This is almost as hot as the $1 million thing on top of it, sitting in this chair. Well, we got married in 1954. Now, we had a refrigerator at home when I was a kid. Oh, I must have been 14 years old. So I'm going on 65. So, what about you? How old were you when you got a refrigerator? See, the older refrigerators, I don't know if you've ever seen them or not, they had a big round dome up on top, dust collector. And this was a refrigeration unit. That's what you saw, you know. Like now you see everybody's got a microwave.
We didn't have one of them.
No, but this was when they first come out. Like nowadays you go in the house, everybody's got a microwave, almost everybody. Well, back then when everybody had a refrigerator, it had this on the top, and that was the way they were sold.
We didn't have a refrigerator. I don't remember when we had a refrigerator.
How'd you keep food from spoiling without a refrigerator?
Well, back then, honey, everybody canned everything. If you had, like my dad used to get venison here, and you would cook the meat and can it in the jars, and that would keep it. And the pork, you got it, the hams, you put them down in the cellar in crocks, and salt, and that would cure them. So that's how you kept your meat. Carl and I, when we was first married, we didn't have a refrigerator for a whole year, but we lived near the store, and so we just...
That was 1954.
Yeah.
Now, back when my father lived...
But I remember when I was younger than you, when we had a fella come by with ice, sold blocks of ice for 50 cents. And that might last a week. And then they'd come back again. And also, there was a fella that came down from Derry that sold meat. He had a wooden, panel truck. It was all open in the back. And he had hot dogs and hamburg. And I used to eat that raw hamburg. I loved it. I could eat a pound of it at a time. And that's the way they got their meat. He'd come house to house with it. And then there was another fellow that would come around with big containers of whole corn and large kernels of cottage cheese. But I had a friend that lived across the bridge from us, and her mother would make round cottage cheese balls.
Yeah.
And so she and I, we used to go house to house and sell them for about 50 cents a ball.
Did you get much money from that?
No, they didn't, but it helped buy things for them because it was a big family. But I know another thing Carl hasn't told you. My dad had a white horse named Topsy. And when I was little, about 5, 6 years old, because we had it before we went to Massachusetts. And because my dad was a logger. He worked for many years in the woods. And so I had this horse Topsy, and I could ride it. I'd go meet my dad at night and ride it either on its back or in the wagon with my dad. But then we had to go to Massachusetts, so he gave it to another man over in Wadsboro. And the other fellow decided he didn't want it anymore. And so Carl's sister, Rosemary, wanted a horse. And so they heard about it. So they went over there, and they got this white horse. And she rode it home from Wadsboro. But it was Topsy. And he didn't know it until after we was married, because he was talking about this Topsy horse, and I didn't say anything, but then finally I said, that's the horse that my dad had.
Secrets in every marriage. You might say I got the before the horse. The cat before the horse.
That doesn't happen every day.
What are some of your earliest childhood memories?
Oh, I had some good ones, and I had lots of bad ones, because when I was 6 years old, my father and mother separated, and there was my brother and I. I have a brother that's 22 months younger than I am. But he's like a son to me, because he and I, we were very, very close. Everywhere I went, he went. So,
In fact, when we got married, he came and lived with us.
yeah.
For a while.
What else would you like to know?
What kinds of toys did you play with? Who made them?
The kids back then played with your bread pans, utensils in the kitchen, and the small. We didn't have the plastic toys and all
You
these.
used to make things.
Well, yes, hon. But I'm saying, at one stage, the younger kids, children, that's what they had. There was no Well, you tell him you love him so.
Well, I tell you, Carl's mother was a seamstress, and she made a lot of nice things. My mother was a seamstress, but not as a seamstress as his mother was, because she did that. She learned that in school. But, like, my mother made all my clothes, and Carl's mother made his sister's clothes, and their wedding dresses. In fact, his mother made Barbara Jean's wedding dress and the bridesmaid dresses when they got married. But I only remember having one doll. I didn't have very many toys, really. We made do with what we had. You know, you went out and you found things to do.
Plus your chores.
Yeah.
Everybody had back then.
You always had pets. You had cats, dogs. We had a little goat at one time. We fed it with a bottle. And Carl, his family had goats, and they had them in the house. But I never had animals in the house, only a dog and a cat.
That could be a cute thing to tell about.
No, don't tell about it.
Part of it. My father got me 2 little goats. They happened to be males. And they weren't housebroken when we had them in the house. So I was just a little fella. So I had to have the tomato can with the cover up like this and a mop. And what I didn't catch, I had a mop. And my mother had, everywhere you walked, she put down newspapers. And a friend of ours, which actually, the son is the one that helped me on the horns that you saw, the bison horns. He helped me do that. Well, his father was a joker and used to stop in, and Dad knew him from the time he was a kid, but he was in the next generation. He stopped in, and once in a while on the paper were these little raisins. They were from the goat. And he'd tell Dad, he says, Charlie, you better get rid of them goats, your wife's going to divorce you. Get rid of them goats, your wife's going to divorce you. So one time Dad goes to the store, and he buys some raisins, chocolate covered. And when Mother put the clean papers down, put the raisins, in comes Perk. Charlie, I told you if you don't get rid of those goats, your wife's going to divorce you. Dad reached down and picked them up. He said, Perk, have you ever tried them? They're not bad. And this is some of the humor that went on back there.
That was what Barbara Jean's grandpa was like. He always had jokes.
Did you ever find out that they were just chocolate-covered raisins?
Oh, I imagine so. Yeah.
Do you remember the first cars, tractors, airplanes?
Our first cars?
No.
My first car was a 1932 Ford with killer doors. Coupe, had a rumble seat. And that was when I was 18 years old, 17. And then after that, I had a bunch of different ones, but that was the first one. No airplanes. What was the other one?
Tractors?
Yeah, our first tractor was a 1948 Cub Farmall, which we still have.
I still use it.
Elton, my grandson, sometimes drives. It sat in the barn for 40 years, and then one day my father said, well, do what you want to do. I took it all apart, put a different crankshaft, fixed it, and we still use it off and on up on the hill.
Is it like big or?
No, a
it's
little 10
small.
horsepower that you set off to one side. It was really made for an inexpensive tractor for small farmers, and especially ones that did crop gardening, where you had to see the row.
Yeah.
And they started out with a Cub, and they had an 8 that was like that, the International. Other tractors were like that.
Yeah, but you go tell him you went all around the neighborhood here
Oh,
in Townsend mowing
To
fields.
help pay for it. I was, how old was I? 11, 12 years old. The road that you went up on the mountain was not there. It was just an old log road. And I'd go with a tractor down, and I had to put it in low gear, and I had to get through 2 brook holes. And I had a little thing on the back, and I'd carry my plow, or then I'd go down and plow gardens all over the town. And then I'd get the disc harrow, put it on the back, and I'd go and disc harrow. And the smallest one I ever did was the parking lot of the hospital across the road from the old hospital. Mrs. Lyman lived there. She was an old lady, and she was the one that taught Dad English.
She was his
And
school teacher.
she had a little garden behind there that you couldn't turn around. You backed in, backed out. We couldn't do a good job. And I always remember, why did they even do it? You know, as kids saying, you know,
Yeah.
it wasn't worth it. But she was a teacher in school when my father come down. He didn't speak a word of English, and she didn't speak a word of German. They draw a picture of a cow, and the teacher would write cow, and he put cow in German. So they taught them, each one taught each other by that. No special ed, no special teacher. It was, what was there you did with it? And that's a lot of the history that went on all over. You did with what you had. In fact, behind me hanging on the beam is a cowbell.
Yep.
My grandfather made that out of a shovel. So any broken piece of metal, which you didn't get, he happened to be a metalsmith. And so this is how that every cow's bell sounded different, because it was never made out of the same piece of metal. So when it was made, depending on how heavy the ringer was inside, it had a different sound.
Did you ever ride an airplane?
Yeah.
Yes, but not until I was, well, about 17 and a half, 18. It was when I went back into the service once. I went out of Keene, New Hampshire, in a two-engine,
19.
well, a year either way. Didn't make that much difference. DC-8, it was what they call the old workhorse. It was just two motors, and it would take about 18 people.
My first airplane trip was to Germany, 22 hours. Took Barbara Jean when she was 22 months old to Augsburg, Germany. That was my first plane ride, my first journey out of Vermont.
There was another kid, too, that went.
Flew from Boston.
She was pregnant 8 months when she went over.
So I never did ride on a train until we was over in
Yeah.
Austria. And then we went on a trip and we put our car on the train and went through a mountain 9 miles. And then we came down the Berna Pass.
We
That-
came out in Italy, and
Yeah.
then we came back to Barnepat. Now, the reason that we were over there was because
Carl was in the
I was
service.
in the service, and I'd been in the National Guard, so I had time enough, so when we came back, the Army paid for shipping our household goods and stuff back. So we lived in Leitershofen, Germany, which is right next to Augsburg. We lived in a little town on what they call German economy, in which it was a house that you either had downstairs or upstairs.
Would you like to know that my dad used to own where the homestead is in Bonneville?
Yeah, sure.
That's where my dad owned. That was he bought a little place there, and I think it was about 1950. And he lived there until it burnt.
How did it burn?
Well, it started with a flood,
Yeah, they had to,
and he flooded out, and then a lot of people helped him, and HUD came in. That's part of a government operation. Cleaned it all out, but somehow the wiring was saturated and later went bad, and he was in bed when he smelled the smoke and stuff, and the house was afire, and it burnt the house almost to the ground.
I don't know what year it was, though.
What did you think of rocket ships going up into space when you were a kid, or like when Sputnik was launched and everything?
Well, we was in Germany when they sent the dog up. That was in...
Sputnik, that wasn't Sputnik,
Well,
was it?
I don't
What did they
know.
call it, Sputnik, but I know they sent the Russians sent the dog up. That was when the race was. and
Yeah,
when the race between the United States and America. Well, you know, a lot of the people older than we were at the time, plus our age, thought it was a big waste. But if you stop and try to weigh it both ways, if you look at your pictures you got today from cameras, you look at your technology with your computers, all that was learned. Heat shields, from heat, all this was learned by money that came out of our pockets, but it might have been spent wisely or not wisely, but the idea is there's things that came out real advanced. In your microwaves, all that stuff came out like fine tuning. In other words, it got better. Your telephone, back when I was a kid, who would ever thought that you take a little phone like this out in the woods and talk to somebody on their next mountain? I mean, that was unheard of, you know. When we were kids, the newspapers had funny papers. And in the funny papers was a cow jumping over the moon and a man landing on the moon. So it was all thought of by somebody putting it on paper. And then, somehow we turned around and did it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to get A for effort here?
Mm-hmm. Yep. You're going to get A for effort.
Okay, that's good.
You did a real good job.
I guess that's it.
Thank you for
Thanks
joining
for,
us.
yeah, and letting us interview you and everything. And see all your bison and...
Yeah, we kind of let that end of our life out about the bison. We went up and saw them all. And it was something that, what it is we have a bison farm that we started up in June of 1991. Actually, it started before then, but the farm got turned over to me from my father. And for some reason, he wouldn't put Eloise's name on it. Old people have different thoughts, see. And he loves Eloise. That was his favorite daughter-in-law, but when it comes to transferring it, had to be in my name. It don't make any difference what you live together 6 years, it's automatically two of us anyway. So I was trying to bring the farm back. It was all trees. I mean, out behind the barn, it was
We
just all
worked
brush.
hard.
Couldn't even see the
You
stone
would
wall.
know how hard we worked.
And so we started bringing it back, and I started putting up a fence for wild animals because I thought I was going to get foul deer. But we don't live up there. And the deer come out when you get down about 70 pounds of meat. Well, if somebody goes up there, they could shoot one, put it in the car, you never know. If a dog got in there, a coyote dog, they'd run them, they'd go through the fence and get killed. So then my thought was, what's the future meat? Well, the future meat is less fat and cholesterol. And there's ostrich and bison. And the bison are closer by, and they were an animal that not too many people fool with. And then we had some people that thought it was wicked, that they'd stampede and go through the houses and everything else. And I had one guy come right in the door, which is now our head selectman. How many signatures we have to get before you stop the idea of getting bison? And I had to convince him that these bison were born and bred behind fences. They were used to it, and they weren't going to trash his land or his house. And so we continued, and we made a trip to Burlington to what they call Tony Perry. He has a restaurant group, but he had a farm. This 1999 spring, he sold most of the farm out. But he had over 100 bison, and we went up and looked. And then we made a deal, but he wanted to get me a bull from North Dakota. And so we never got him until the middle of June of 1991. And we started learning. The learning process is a daily thing. Nobody knows it all. And you can go up there every day and learn something different. And it's either something you forgot that you learned the year before, you might have to relearn it, or it's something that's done different. And it's quite a tourist attraction. We don't charge for it because we're on both sides of the road. Well, we have it at a local diner now for 4 years called the Townsend Dam Diner. That is the name of it. It's about 3 miles up the road from our home. Our home is not where the bison are. That's about 4 miles off the beaten trail. And we butcher about 4 a year, and we sold some breeding stock. And we sell it right out of the house. It's cut, packaged, wrapped, and inspected in a slaughterhouse up north. And we have about 3 or 4 people a week come back for repeats, customers, and it's starting to, more people are realizing that you got heart trouble, you can't eat red meat, but you can eat bison. So some of those people are coming back. So when we went on the hill and saw this, you saw some of what goes on.
And the Colemans bought one animal, so they have one animal, and so that's why Elton and his dad helped, because they have one animal.
By now they got more
But
than
they've
one.
got
but
more.
it's
It's added. We don't know how many they've
It's
got.
sort of a gimmick. When we've had them a while, we had one die. And so Elton says, well, that's not his, that's yours. And so then when we decided which was which, well, he wanted the big one and I had the small one. So we never decide whose is what because they're all there and, you know, they come down and eat it. And my wife cooks it. She learned how to cook it very well. Not very well. That's the wrong way to cook meat. It's got to be rare or medium rare. And it's a different meat. It's solid meat with no marbling. And you have to cook it slow and low and no fork. Why I say no fork is you don't puncture the meat. You seal it when you cook it so it keeps the juices in.
You don't use a fork to turn the steak. You use the tongs because you don't want to lose any of your juices out of it because there's nothing. You have to keep the juices in. So.
Well, thanks for letting us interview you.
Yes, thank you.
Glad you could do
Now,
it.
do we get any percentage on the booby prize you're going to win?
Not yet.
Not
I
yet.
don't even know what the booty prize is.
So, Debbie, what did you think of your bison burger?